Is it going? Welcome to Wake the Fuck Up Wednesday. Oh my gosh. It's May. How did that happen? Anyway, I am celebrating this week a year of Rebel Buddhist. I am so stoked. Hey Kim. Hey Tara Jean. Um, I remember when I first started Rebel Buddhist, I was like, trying to record a bunch of my episodes in advance, and I would get laryngitis when I would go to start to record them. And I would just be like, oh, look at me doing an upper limit problem here. So, upper limit problems are basically when you get in your own way. So, there's some issue going on that you feel like you don't deserve to have a podcast, for example, that you're not worthy to do a podcast, or, where we're trying to hit our next income goal or another goal of ours, and we have something in us that feels like we can't achieve that or shouldn't achieve that or aren't worthy, or that, we don't have the skills to do it, and then we get in our own way. So, like with some of my clients, I see that when they are like not, like they have a goal to write a book and they're not writing a book, or they have a goal to start a business and they don't even put up a website yet, or they're not telling anybody about what they do, for example. So we have these upper limit problems. So I just love thinking about how, last year I was having all these upper limit problems about the Rebel Buddhist podcast. And then now I'm like, well, shit, here I am. It's just the thing I do every week now. So it is totally possible. Okay. I just wanted to let you know. All right. So today, what I wanted to talk about is gossip. And I know that sounds super weird. But I wanted to talk about gossip because people are like, well, isn't gossip a high school thing? I mean, even Gossip Girl was all based in high school, right? But, you know, gossip is actually something that we all fall prey to, because it's not just this sort of like chitty chatty, oh, I'm just trying to like talk shit about someone I know. Gossip, in the way that I'm talking about it, is not just where, we're kind of intentionally causing harm to someone, which we see in like Gossip Girl or whatever that show was, which was brilliantly written, by the way. But when we are also just having ulterior motives for when we speak, right? And, we can put it in the context of like idle chatter, and where this all fits in with mindful speech. Because even though we may think, well, I don't really gossip, like I'm above that. Like, how many times do we say something that we're not totally sure is true, right? How often do we say something that, like, just to get a response from someone? How often do we say something to just sort of create some drama and create some connection somehow to people, right? So, Pabonka Rinpoche, who is a very famous Tibetan Buddhist teacher, he said idle gossip is like the best way to waste time in this precious life. Like, it's so easy. Like, if we're going to talk about, think of a really good way you could waste your time, it's sitting around talking shit, right? So we want to think about, how often am I actually speaking mindfully? Right? So, what is gossip? So, a lot of people talk about gossip like, oh, it's when we are saying something about someone else that we don't even know is true, or that we flat out know is not true, right? But it can also come in the context of like politics, right? Talking about fake news where we don't have any like data to back anything up. We're spewing things around there that are probably untrue, right? Or when we are talking about theories that are unbacked, right, by science. I'm not saying everything has to be backed by science, but I'm saying there is definitely a trend right now where people are talking about things and stating things as if they are facts when there's no data to back things up. So it's one thing to say, wow, don't know if this is true or not. Like, what do you think? Let's talk about this. That's different than, you know what I heard? I heard that this is going on. Like, that's gossip, right? Where we're not owning that we don't know all the facts yet, that we don't know if they're verified yet or not. So we know that gossip causes problems. We know that we don't want to be gossiped about and that it causes a lot of suffering. It's exhausting to be someone who's gossiping. It's exhausting to be the recipient of that gossip. Like, even if you're not the topic of the gossip, it's exhausting to be like, somebody's talking to someone about someone else, yada, yada, and you're sitting there kind of receiving it. I mean, check in with yourself. When someone is gossiping to you, it may seem juicy, it may seem interesting, but deep down, you're kind of like, what the fuck? Like, you on some level know it's not the right thing to do, right? And then we also find ourselves getting more exhausted because we recognize it's taking emotional energy because we're not feeling safe with someone who is gossiping, right? We're not feeling safe with someone who is talking shit about someone else because we are like, well, they might talk shit about us. So I better watch what I say and what I'm going to share. And I'm just going to keep their energy off of me, right? So, and this kind of relates to what I'm going to go into about why we gossip to begin with. So just keep that in mind. It's actually draining to gossip. It's draining for the person you're gossiping to, and it's certainly not cool for the person that you're gossiping about, right? However, we all do it. I was just at a party and I was just noticing how easily we fall into gossip. Not even malicious gossip, but just like, oh, is so and so still seeing that person? Or, oh, what's going on with them? And it's sort of like, that's not our story to tell, right? Like, they're not here. Like, let's talk about us. Let's talk about me and you, and let's connect that way. So, I want to go into why we gossip, okay? Usually it's because we want to connect. We are human and we are social creatures and we want to connect. And so we've been trained like, hey, an easy way to do that is by creating some drama and having some juicy stuff to share, right? And so we bring that to the table and we're like, hey, I have something to share with you. Come and check it out. But the motive behind it is that we want to connect. So that's important to remember, right? Whenever we find ourselves gossiping, we don't have to shit on ourselves. We can go, wow, it looks like I really want to connect. On another level, it's I want to feel like I belong. Like, I want to feel like important here. I want people to listen to me. I want to feel like I have something to say. I want to feel like it's worthwhile, right? For me to be here. I want to belong to this group of people. That's ultimately where it's coming from, right? But we can have other motivations for why we think it's a good idea, because that's usually not where we're coming from. Like, oh, I'm just going to do this because I want to belong. We have other ideas for why we should be gossiping in that moment. And I'm going to pull up my notes because there is a lot that I wanted to cover. And I just want to make sure because we have a short amount of time. All right. So the most common reasons that we gossip, I'm going to go over a few of them right here. Okay. One of them is we think that bad mouthing someone else is going to improve our self-esteem, right? We think, I feel shitty about where I'm at in my life. So I'm going to pick someone who has all the things I wish I had, and I'm going to talk about how unfair it is that they were born with a trust fund and how they don't actually understand the value of hard work and how easy life must be to not have to work or not have to worry about finances, right? So this is how, like, one way we think, oh, if I do this, I'm going to feel better about myself, right? So we chastise them about all of their good fortune, right? But this has the opposite effect. It doesn't improve our self-esteem, right? Because even, let's say everything that we said was true, Self-esteem on that front is based on comparing ourselves to others. And whether or not what you said about that person is true, there's always going to be someone who's smarter, wealthier, stronger, and better looking than us, right? And so it's on a shaky foundation, you see? So our self esteem actually isn't improved. We actually feel more nervous because we're basing it on something outside of ourselves, and that's so fragile, right? Okay, so we end up like repairing this foundation, running to patch it up. Oh, wait, I'm better looking than that person. Wait, I'm smarter than that person. And we move around trying to patch it up. That's fucking exhausting. And it actually doesn't build up our ZG, our radiant inner confidence, because it's based on this external validation. Another reason we gossip, we think that if someone hurts us, that this will right that wrong, right? So if we have a friend who like flakes on us, right? They bail on us last minute, like they were supposed to meet up with us or go to an event. And we're kind of pissed about that. We may feel justified when we talk to someone else about it. Like, oh, they're so selfish. They don't know how to prioritize. They're so flaky, yada, yada, right? But what really happens here, right? Instead of working it out with them, we're unloading our negative feelings on our other friends, right? And then we can feel like a victim, right? We can feel like, oh, like, look, poor me, they bailed on me and they're so bad. But this is an example of how our ego finds victimhood really comforting. But in reality, it's a super disempowering place to be, right? Instead, we should turn our energy towards talking to that person, creating healthy boundaries, right? Because ultimately, we're not going to feel better by shit talking that person. We're going to feel better by creating a better situation, changing our mindset about it, stepping out of victimhood and into a more empowering place, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, wanting to bond with people is a really big reason, right? So, we want to look like the person that they want to hang out with. Like, I'm the one you should be hanging out with. I'm the one worth listening to. And so maybe if we're kind of awkward in a social situation and we're like, what should I talk about? Oh, I'll talk about that project that totally went to shit. It's a good story. And then you tell this project, and even though you were part of the project, you talk about the other person and how they fucked everything up, and we don't take responsibility for our role in it, right? But it's a little entertaining, right? And this might work superficially, like people might laugh or sympathize, but deep down, right? Your goal is to bond and connect. Deep down, those other people, they're feeling unsafe with you because you aren't owning your part of it. And on a subconscious level, others will take note of this, right? And then there's less trust. So then those relationships only exist on a superficial gossip level about other people, and we actually aren't connecting. So even though what we want is that connection, we're not actually connecting because that's an emotional risk. And other people aren't going to take an emotional risk with you if you don't create this safe container for that to happen, right? So, another thing is that we are jealous. We get jealous and we want to affirm our own worth, right? So, maybe we've been hitting the dating scene for years and years and years and are super over it. Like, why can't I find my life partner? And then someone you know gets engaged after dating someone for a few months. Um, so then you talk about how, like, oh, but they're just settling. They're not really as happy as they seem, or they just want their partner's money, right? But I'm holding out for true love. I'm not going to settle, right? So when we feel this jealousy, instead of having mudita, instead of having sympathetic joy, we're trying to make it so that we seem like the better choice. But as the thought model shows us, right? As the active meditation model shows us, I call it, we're not the better choice. We don't seem like the better choice. We seem really fucking insecure when we talk that way, right? So ultimately, you know, On some level, we also gossip. Like a fifth reason is we feel unsafe. We're in a social situation and we feel anxious, we feel nervous. And so instead of dealing with that difficult emotion, we gossip to take up space and we push our feelings down to make others afraid, right? So maybe we feel unsafe, let's say not even socially. Let's say we're stressed about COVID. And instead of dealing with that anxiety, we doom scroll and then we talk shit. Did you hear about how this awful thing could happen to you? And I read this and this awful thing could happen. And, we spread fake news without verifying it first because instead of dealing with our own fear, we are distracting ourselves by all of these other actions and by gossiping, not just about other people, but like events and news and politics and stuff, right? So we start off doing it because we want our fear to go away, but now we're spreading it, right? So you can see I can see why Pabonka Rinpoche said that. You're like, really? Like out of all the fucked up things humans could do, you're saying that idle gossip is like the best way to waste this life? So think about it. This is where all of this is coming from, right? So we want our discomfort to go away. So we start gossiping, but we're really avoiding those difficult feelings like insecurity, fear, loneliness, abandonment, being let down, not feeling worthy. So you can see why we do this, right? Because we don't want to feel those things. But you can also see now how when we gossip, we're actually making all that worse, right? The insecurity. We're building relationships based on a shaky foundation, talking shit about other people, saying shit that we don't even know is true, right? That does not create safe, secure relationships, right? We create more loneliness by distancing people who feel like they can't trust us, right? So I don't want you to like beat yourselves up about this. I want you to see that this is a thing that humans do. We are so wacky and crazy, right? This is why it's written like, if you look at like monastic vows, like idle gossip is one that you're not supposed to engage in. It's not like they're like, oh, that's only for teenage girls. Like people who want to be monks got to deal with this shit too. People who want to be nuns, people who want to be amazing leaders in this world, who want to be leaders and want to change the world and be good people. We gossip because it's a human need to connect and to feel like we belong. So we need to just become aware. We can ask ourselves first, what am I avoiding? Right? What am I avoiding by wanting to gossip here? Right? What is the emotion that I'm wanting? And it's this awareness, one of the ways I'll go real quick into some 5 tips to stop gossiping too, or at least gossip less. But part of it is we need to train our brain to become aware of when we do this so that we can say, oh, whoa, back up, right? And I mean, my friends and I, we don't want to gossip, but we fall into it, right? And so we're pretty comfortable right now. At some point, we're like, oh, you know what? This isn't our story to tell. We should let her tell the story, right? So like, you don't have to come out and be like, this is bad. We're gossiping. Like we have a way of languaging it now where we know we're trying to hold each other up and not gossip. So when we fall into it, we can just say, oh, not our story to tell. Gotta wait for girlfriend to join us. Or maybe we'll call them and be like, girl, update us because we're talking about you, right? So there's ways that we can do this in a joyful way, in a compassionate way. So self-compassion is huge because if you're sitting there shitting on yourself, it's going to make all of this spiral down. You're already feeling shitty, which is why the gossip starts to begin with, right? Okay. So the self-compassion is important because then we're not in the, oh, fuck, nobody loves me and I'm at this social situation and it's really crazy. We start with self-compassion to bring us out of fight, flight, or freeze, right? And I really want us to ask ourselves, what is my intent when I'm about to open my mouth, right? What are we avoiding by looking outward instead of inward? What are we achieving by holding up a magnifying glass instead of looking in a mirror? We can ask ourselves, what is my intent here? So sometimes we just shoot the shit, right? I find more and more I just don't shoot the shit anymore. Even in, especially as a life coach, like even at a party where I'm just meeting someone, I'm not talking about the weather. I'm like, yeah, so are you happy with how your life is right now? Like I just dive right in, right? Like let's get real. Let's get real and connect with each other. But if you're really wanting to differentiate between what is just benign chit chat and versus gossip, we look at our intent, right? What am I intending by doing this? What am I intending by about to open my mouth? And Rumi talks about the three gates, right? Like, is it necessary? And is it kind? And is it true, right? Is what I'm about to say true? Do I know it's true? Is it necessary? Is it going to be helpful somehow? Is it going to be inspiring to people somehow? Is this information necessary? Will it improve upon silence, right? And then is it kind? Now, this doesn't mean you only open your mouth to say sweet nothings, right? You may speak fiercely because you're being kind to a group of people you're protecting. You may speak fiercely to protect yourself. So the kindness doesn't have to be, in the way you're saying it. It's is the intent kind, right? Okay, so we only got a few minutes here. You can get more in the pod, okay? But I want to give you some tips, 5 tips for gossiping less, okay? So the mindfulness and meditation practice is key. Why? Because we first have to be aware when we're doing it. Otherwise, we're not going to even notice it. And when we practice meditation and mindfulness, we create a bigger pause between the trigger and the event. So we can notice, I'm feeling uncomfortable and I want to gossip here, but I'm not going to. We can notice, I'm starting to gossip. Okay, I can back up here and take it back. You want to bookend your day with an intention that you may not harm anybody with your words. I wake up, I say, may I not harm anyone with my body, speech, or mind? Right? I go body, speech, mind. Speech being the gossip, right? May I not harm anyone. Speech also in, me having a particularly good skill at ripping people a new one. So, and then at the end of your day, you can review, how did I honor my intention for this morning to really show up, right? Oh, hey, Dawn. I saw Dawn just hopped on here. Dawn's my amazing massage therapist in Hawaii, but like she's moving back and forth. So I don't get to see her as much as often. Anyway, so you're going to bookend your day, okay? Intention in the morning to not harm people with my body, mind, or speech. And then at the end of the day, review it. What went well? Don't end your day shitting on yourself. You can say, okay, I could have improved on these points, but where did I do a good job? I really wanted to say this and didn't. I like ending on a good note before I go to bed. Okay. Silent retreats are awesome. Whether you do a 24-hour one, I do a 24-hour silent retreat once a month. And I like to do 10-day retreats at least twice a year, but with COVID, that's been a little challenging. But silent retreats are amazing because you realize how often you want to talk about nothing that really needs to get said. It feels really important, but you don't get to say it because it's a silent retreat. And then you're like, damn, all these times I feel like I really have to say this. I really don't need to. It helps you, kind of like when you do a cleanse and you're like, yeah, in my regular life, I don't eat that differently from my cleanse. And then you go do a cleanse and you're like, oh shit, I would have eaten that. I would have drank that. I would have had that. It makes you more aware of your habitual patterns, right? Another thing is to really cultivate that compassion and loving kindness for others, right? The more our hearts open to others, the less likely we are to gossip because we're more aware of how we don't want to harm them, right? So we can practice mudita, sympathetic joy. In the show notes for the podcast tomorrow, um, I'll put in the episode where I talk about sympathetic joy and really cultivating a practice to be happy for other people's happiness. That can help, right? So I'm going to close here with a quote from the Buddha. He says, if speech has 5 marks, it's speech that is timely, true, gentle, purposeful, and spoken. Whoa, that always does that. Spoken with a mind of loving kindness, right? So again, that quote from Rumi, before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Right? Is it true? Is this fact or just an opinion? Is it necessary? Is this better left unsaid? Or is it helpful or inspirational? And is it kind? What is your intent? What is your motivation for communicating right now? Okay. And I think this is a great guideline for what you're going to post on social media too, because that can be really effed up in terms of what we see people doing these days, right? So I want to invite you. My little challenge to you is that for 1 week, see what happens when you refrain from false speech and you speak from your heart. So commit to not gossiping, positively or negatively, or speaking about anyone who's not actually present with you. Just try a week of that. Don't talk about anyone who's not physically present with you, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And just see what you notice. See what shifts happen. Okay? Maybe you'll have more energy. Maybe you'll learn how often you would have been doing that. Maybe you'll feel really uncomfortable because you're like, well, what else do I fill the space with? Who knows? But this is like one big adventure, right? So there's no judgment here. There's no like, oh, are you a gossiper and I'm not a gossiper or whatever it is. We are human. It is natural for us to want to connect and to bond. And because we have a brain and we're born in a body at this day and age, we have some really fucked up ideas about what will actually make us happy that aren't true. So we're just practicing and learning the things that are true. And what makes us really happy is feeling love for people, feeling compassion for people, connecting with people on a heart level. That is what brings us true happiness, right? That's what brings us ultimate security, ultimate safety. Okay. I also have a confidence training where I talk about this, how, confidence comes from living in integrity, because then we're not worried, oh, someone's going to find this out about me or something like that, right? Confidence comes from living in integrity, and this is part of it. So have an amazing rest of your week. I'm really looking forward to some fucking sunshine. Alaska, can you send me some sunshine, please? Because I'm going to be really stoked for that. So, all right. I'm sending you all so much love. If you want to join Freedom School, join freedomschool.com. I would love to have you in there. We're focusing on self-compassion this month, and next month is rewriting your whole life story. It's some pretty awesome shizzle. So I will see you in there. Now, I'm going to close out Facebook Live because apparently last time I didn't, and you all got to see like 10 minutes of my discussions with my copywriter. All right. Bye, y'all. Ciao. You're welcome, Kim.